continuing with killing innocent people, committing so many massacres. Nothing justifies denying men, women, and children their right to food and to medicine. Almost 1 million Palestinians now are at ICP level 5. That means over 1 million Palestinians are facing famine. Supplies have not been allowed into major parts of Gaza, including the north. So basically what we have is that Palestinians are killed by Israeli bullets, and we're having Palestinians dying from starvation, from dehydration. This has gone on for way too far. Israel has violated every humanitarian law, every moral principle, every humanitarian value, and unfortunately the world is still unable to say enough and say stop. Today the Security Council will be voting on a resolution demanding a ceasefire, demanding the entry of supplies. We urge all members of the Security Council to support that resolution, if only to send a message that what's happening is unacceptable and what's happening has to stop. Obviously, Israel has ignored UN Security Council resolutions before. There are no indications that it will honor this one, but I think what adopting the resolution would do today is just to send a message that Israel cannot continue to with its aggression with impunity, in complete disregard to international law, in complete disregard to human values, and in complete disregard to life. Sir, you said it aptly. Not too long ago, Gaza has become an open graveyard, not just for children, but for international law. And the consequences for that are extremely devastating, not just to the region, but to the whole principles of peace and order that your organization stands for. We thank you for your strong voice. We thank you for the positions that you've taken, demanding respect for international law, demanding respect for the UN Charter, and urging an immediate end to war crimes and to the killing and starving of the innocent. And we will continue to work with you, sir, to make sure that we end this madness, and we're going to continue to work with our international partners to make sure that the world stands united in saying enough is enough. Enough killing, enough war crimes, enough massacring of innocent, and enough impunity for violating international law and humanitarian law as well. The UN and Jordan have been solid partners for decades. Not only do we work together on the Palestinian issue, but we also work together on addressing the needs of refugees. Obviously, UNRWA is here, and I recognize the Commissioner General, him and his organization have been doing a tremendous job in trying to ease the suffering of the Palestinian people at those times that are, again, trying our whole humanity. So I just want to say that UNRWA is indispensable, it is irreplaceable, and we're happy to see that many countries are coming back now to helping UNRWA save lives, because every dollar that is given to UNRWA is saving a human life, and every dollar taken away from UNRWA carries the risk of having a child suffer and die from the lack of food and medicine. So we stand together in supporting the agency and in urging all our partners to continue to provide UNRWA with the support that it so deserves, so that it can, again, do the basic job of just simply saving lives. Also, we've been working together on many other facets of cooperation, particularly in relation to the Syrian refugees. And while we are grateful for the support the UN and the international community has been given to help us in our effort to provide Syrian refugees with dignified lives and meet their needs and make sure that they're not victimized again. They've been victims of conflict. We cannot victimize them by having them ignored by the international community. But I have to say that we must ring the alarm and ring it loud about the dwindling support that's coming to refugees. Many UN agencies are cutting down their services in Jordan simply because not enough aid is coming. That means the burden will shift to us, and we simply cannot carry that burden alone. So again, we urge that our partners continue to show the responsibility towards Syrian refugees who do deserve a life of dignity and fulfillment until conditions are conducive for them to voluntarily go back to their country, which is the only realistic answer to their plight. So On all those issues, sir, we're going to continue to work as partners. We have immediate priorities right now in which we are aligned. End the aggression, allow sufficient humanitarian supplies in, and obviously prevent what would be another massacre in Rafah. The whole world is saying going into Rafah will lead to a humanitarian massacre. The Israeli government is not listening. They're still reaffirming that they will go into Rafah. And I would just conclude by saying that we cannot allow a group of radicals, racist, extremist ministers to doom the future of the region to more conflict and more war, and more immediately, we cannot allow them to continue to kill with impunity. Thank you, sir. I welcome you in Jordan, and I look forward to further engagement.
Assalamu alaikum. Dear Foreign Minister Safadi, dear friend, thank you for your warm welcome. And it's good to be back in Jordan, especially at such a critical time for the region and for the world. When I see Jordan, I see solidarity in action. And I see in the words and deeds of His Majesty King Abdullah a global champion for peace. And I see it in the spirit of the people of Jordan and your enormous compassion towards those fleeing upheaval. Jordan is home to the largest number of Palestinian refugees. I visited the camp earlier today and commend Jordan for your pivotal advocacy for the vital work of UNRWA. You have also opened your hearts and doors to many others, including refugees from Syria. And I urge the international community to support Jordan as it supports millions of people in need. It is very worrying, the reduction of funding in relation to refugee programs in Jordan and in other parts of the world. Jordan's spirit of solidarity is precisely what brings me here once again. I am on my annual solidarity mission during the holy months of Ramadan, where I visit and fast with Muslim communities in distress. Ramadan is meant to be a period of celebration, but not this year. Hearts are heavy in the region and indeed around the world from the unprecedented and ongoing devastation in Gaza, as well as rising violence in the occupied West Bank. I commend Jordan for your support for de-escalation, including particularly your very important role in East Jerusalem. And I salute Jordan for your relentless effort to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza, including through the personal efforts and wisdom of His Majesty. For my part, I will keep pushing for the removal of all obstacles to life-saving aid, for more access and for more entry points. But we must face facts. There will be no sustainable humanitarian solution with an ongoing war as bloody as this. Let me repeat, nothing justifies the abhorrent October 7 attacks and hostage-taking by Hamas, and nothing justifies the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The effective delivery of humanitarian aid requires the immediate delivery of a humanitarian ceasefire. The need is urgent. I was at the Rafah border crossing this weekend, and I met with injured Palestinian civilians and heard directly from our frontline humanitarian colleagues. They are veterans of some of the worst humanitarian crises in recent decades. They have seen it all, and yet, without exception, they told me they had never seen anything as horrible as what is happening in Gaza today. The scale and speed of the deaths and destruction are on an entirely different level. And now starvation is bearing down on Palestinians in Gaza. There is a growing consciousness around the world that all of this must stop. The fighting must end now. The hostages must be released now, and we must not lose sight of the big picture. A lasting end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only come through a two-state solution. Israelis must see their legitimate needs for security materialized, and Palestinians must see their legitimate aspirations for a fully independent, viable, and sovereign state realized in line with United Nations resolutions, international law, and previous agreements. We know where the alternative would lead, to indefinitely prolonging a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security, to exacerbating polarization, to emboldening extremists everywhere. Those standing in the way of a two-state solution have an obligation to state clearly what is the alternative they want. How would the future look with such a large number of Palestinians inside without any real sense of freedom, of rights, and of dignity? This would be inconceivable. The two-state solution is the only way to address the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. I know it is easy to be cynical in today's world, but that's a luxury we cannot afford. Cynicism is a form of surrender to the prevailing assumptions of the moment. It is a refuge for those too weak, too narrow, too timid to imagine a better future. When things are difficult, we must try even harder. And I will keep pushing for peace inspired by your example. And once again, dear Foreign Minister, dear friends, thank you and thank the government and people of Jordan for leading the way to solidarity and peace.
Take some questions, if you can.
زيد خليفات قناة المملكة بخصوص ما يحدث في شمال غزة.
Sorry, the volume is not enough. No, it's the volume that's it. It's my.
تمام.
I have to take this out to be able to listening to you. Yes, I can hear you now.
ما يحدث في شمال غزة ووقف وصول المساعدات إلى غزة في الوقت الحالي بالتزامن مع موضوع الشروع في الدخول في رفح كعملية برية. كيف تنظر الأمم المتحدة؟ كيف تنظرون أنتم والشركاء في موضوع تخفيف المعاناة، وخصوصا أن هنالك شبه مجاعة ستكون في الأيام القادمة وهي تنذر بخطر كبير على الفلسطينيين الأبرياء؟
First of all, in relation to the northern part of Gaza, it is absolutely essential to have a massive supply of humanitarian aid now. And this means opening more entry points. This means a concentration of efforts of all entities without obstacles, without limitations from the Israeli side, in order to be able to rescue the people of northern Gaza of an imminent risk of famine. Many children are already today dying of hunger. Finally, in relation to the south, to Rafah, our position has been very clear. We consider that a ground offensive against Rafah could lead to a catastrophic humanitarian situation.
فقط أود أن أضيف ثمة مجاعة في غزة وثمة وضع إنساني كارثي في الشمال، لأن إسرائيل تمنع دخول المساعدات وتستخدم الطعام سلاحا. تنتهي هذه المجاعة وتنتهي هذه المأساة الإنسانية إذا توقف العدوان، وإذا سمحت إسرائيل بدخول المساعدات عبر المعابر البرية إلى غزة. فثمة مجاعة لأن هناك قرارا سياسيا لهذه الحكومة الإسرائيلية بمنع دخول المساعدات إلى غزة، لكن المساعدات متوفرة. جميعنا مستعدون لأن نوفر كل ما يحتاجه الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في غزة في خلال أيام. المساعدات موجودة، آليات العمل موجودة، ما هو غائب هو قرار إسرائيلي بوقف استخدام التجويع سلاح، بوقف منع دخول المساعدات إلى غزة. شكرا.
السؤال الأول للضيف. إسرائيل منعت بالأمس الأونروا من إدخال مساعدات إلى شمال قطاع غزة المنكوب حقيقة، وهي تحرض على الأونروا وتتهمها بالعمل لصالح المقاومة الفلسطينية. هل هنالك من دور واضح قد يكون دور دولي للرد على هذا الموقف الإسرائيلي؟ وأيضا كيف تقيمون وضع الشمال في هذا اليوم في هذه الساعة تحديدا؟ السؤال الآخر لوزير الخارجية الأردني أيمن الصفدي. واضح بأن إسرائيل تشتري الوقت حاليا وهي ترفض وقف إطلاق النار. أنتم باستمرار تدعون بشكل متواصل لوقف إطلاق النار، لكن أين هو صدى هذه الدعوة المهمة؟ وهو سؤال قد يوجه إلى الدبلوماسية العربية ككل. أين هو صدى هذه الدعوات؟ وكيف يمكن أن يكون هنالك موقف مؤثر لجعل هذه الدعوات يعني ناجحة وناجعة على أرض الواقع؟ شكرا.
The decision not to allow UNRWA's convoys to go to northern Gaza, where we have a dramatic starvation situation, is totally unacceptable. And those that took that decision must assume the responsibility, facing history, of the consequences of the decision in relation to the dramatic situation of the people in northern Gaza, where, as I mentioned, we have already children dying of hunger.
موقف المملكة ليس فقط في الدعوة ولكن العمل من أجل وقف العدوان موقف انطلق منذ اليوم الأول، والجهد لم يتوقف وهو جهد مستمر. لكن لنكن واقعيين، الأردن وحده لن يكون قادرا على فرض وقف هذا العدوان الذي تتحدى فيه إسرائيل العالم كله. كما قلت، تخرق كل قانون دولي، تخرق القانون الدولي الإنساني، ومستمرة في عدوان بدأنا نرى أن أصواتا أكثر في العالم بدأت ترفضه وتتصدى له. ثمة تغير في الموقف الدولي إزاء العدوان الإسرائيلي، إزاء ما يحدث من تجويع للناس، من قتل لهم، من حرمانهم من المساعدات. لكن ما زلنا نتعامل مع واقع تتحدى فيه إسرائيل القانون الدولي، وتتحدى فيه حتى شركائها. حتى الولايات المتحدة الشريك الأكبر لإسرائيل قالت بعدم شن الهجوم على رفح وطالبت بإدخال المساعدات، لكن إسرائيل تتحدى الولايات المتحدة أيضا، وتتحدى الأمم المتحدة، وتتحدى القانون الدولي. اليوم كما قلت هنالك مشروع لقرار لمجلس الأمن يطالب بوقف للنار، يطالب بإدخال مساعدات. نحث جميع أعضاء مجلس الأمن على تبني هذا القرار، حتى ولو فقط من أجل اتخاذ موقف أخلاقي قانوني بأن ما يحدث من جرائم حرب، ما يحدث من قتل الأبرياء، ما يحدث من تجويع لهم، مرفوض وغير مقبول، ويشكل خرقا لكل ما يمثله مجلس الأمن ويمثله القانون الدولي العالمي. بالنهاية إسرائيل تقوم بما تقوم به لأن ليس هناك ما يردعها عالميا. ما نقوله أن الوقت تجاوزنا الوقت الذي يجب أن تواجه فيه إسرائيل تبعات ما تقوم به. هذه الحكومة الإسرائيلية التي يقودها متطرفون عنصريون لا يمكن أن يسمح لهم بالاستمرار في قتل الأبرياء وبإغراق المنطقة كلها في خطر توسع الحرب واستمرار الصراع. بدلا من إرسال السلاح إلى إسرائيل يجب إرسال الوفود التي تفرض عليها وقف الحرب، يجب إرسال المساعدات، يجب أن تواجه إسرائيل الحكومة الإسرائيلية الحالية عقوبات على ما تقوم به من خرق للقانون الدولي. بغير ذلك نحن نرى المأساة التي تستمر وتتفاقم في غزة، نرى خطر هذه المأساة بالتوسع إقليميا موجود بشكل أكبر، نرى النظام العالمي كله يفقد صدقيته أمام ازدواجية المعايير وأمام خرق إسرائيل لهذا النظام. فبالنسبة لنا في الأردن والجهود التي يقودها جلالة الملك حفظه الله منذ اليوم الأول لم تتوقف، مستمرة، نقوم بما نستطيعه. تبقى القضية الفلسطينية قضيتنا الأولى، يبقى الشعب الفلسطيني وحماية حقوقه ومصالحه وحقه في الحياة أولوية أولى بالنسبة لنا، نكرس كل جهودنا وإمكانياتنا من أجلها، لكننا نحن والعالم كله في مواجهة كما قلت حكومة إسرائيلية هي الأكثر تطرفا في تاريخ إسرائيل، حكومة تضرب بعرض الحائط ليس فقط القوانين الدولية ولكن كل القيم الإنسانية والأخلاقية أيضا، وتستمر في قتل وتجويع الأبرياء. وهذا ما نعمل على وقفه بالتعاون مع كل أشقائنا في المنطقة، مع شركائنا في المجتمع الدولي، مع الأمم المتحدة، مع كل من يريد أن يتخذ موقفا ضد العدوان وضد الباطل وضد الشر ومن أجل الحق ومن أجل الكرامة ومن أجل الإنسانية ومن أجل حق الشعب الفلسطيني لأن يعيش بأمن وسلام. وأبعد من المأساة الحالية التي نراها، موقف الأردن كان دائما يعمل من أجل إنهاء الصراع من خلال السبيل الوحيد الذي ينهيه، وهو إنهاء الاحتلال وتلبية حق الشعب الفلسطيني في الحرية والدولة ذات السيادة على ترابه الوطني على خطوط الرابع من حزيران 1967 وعاصمتها القدس المحتلة. بغير ذلك سيبقى الصراع مفتوحا، تنتهي هذه الحرب ستبدأ حروب أخرى، لأن سبب الصراع لن يكون تغير، ولأن الناس لا يمكن أن تقبل بهذا الوضع الذي يكرس فيه الاحتلال وتغيب فيه آفاق ليس فقط الحقوق السياسية ولكن آفاق الحياة بحرية وبكرامة أمام 5 مليون فلسطيني أو أكثر يعيشون تحت هذا الاحتلال.
Maria Wild Ali, The Jordan Times. After more than 5 months of brutal violence and collective punishments that inflicted upon Palestinians by Israeli occupation forces, today the Security Council is held hostage by a couple of members who stand behind empty arguments at the expense of Palestinian lives, thereby the Council failing to assume its responsibilities and maintain international peace and security. The question is, how will the UN remedy the diminished credibility of its own promises? And what are the new challenges to conflict resolution that this war presented? Finally, what are the mechanisms to pressure Israel at this point to allow full aid into Gaza, taking into consideration that denying aid contradicts ICJ's ruling, which ordered immediate measures to protect Palestinians in Gaza from the risk of genocide by ensuring sufficient humanitarian assistance? Thank you.
I think it's necessary to recognize that the United Nations is a complex organization. In the United Nations, you have humanitarian agencies that are today working in Gaza with an extreme courage. We have already 171 workers, staff members of UNRWA that were killed in Gaza. And they are United Nations. So you have in the United Nations extraordinary examples of courage and generosity and solidarity with people suffering. The United Nations is also the General Assembly that has assumed clear positions in relation to this conflict. The United Nations is the Secretary-General that has been assuming, on behalf of the Secretariat, clear positions in relation to this conflict. And the United Nations is also the Security Council. And indeed, the Security Council today is victim of the enormous geopolitical divides in the world, with the superpowers at odds with each other, and creating a situation in which it's very difficult to find consensus in relation to any of the difficult crises we are facing in the world, not only in relation to Gaza. And that is why it is so important that finally the Security Council became able to approve a resolution asking for a ceasefire in Gaza. But at the same time, It is our duty to do everything to mobilize the whole of the international community, and I see a consensus emerging in the international community, even in the countries that are friends and allies of Israel. I see a consensus emerging that this war must stop. I see a consensus emerging that any ground offensive against Rafah would lead to a catastrophic humanitarian situation. I see a consensus emerging in the international community to tell Israel that, fully recognizing the grievances caused by the horrific attacks of Hamas in the 7th of October, fully recognizing the drama of the hostages that need to be immediately and unconditionally released, fully recognizing those aspects, nothing can justify this collective punishment of the Palestinian people that is causing such an immense tragedy in Gaza.
Shukran. Sir, thank you very much.